Welcome to the Fit Strong Women Over 50 podcast, episode number 192. Hi, I'm Chris. Thank you for joining us today.
And I'm Jill. Chris and I are your hosts for this podcast and the founders of the Becoming Ellie community.
We decided to name our community Becoming Ellie because Ellie was the Norse goddess of aging who beat Thor in a wrestling match. Jill and I thought, hey, we want to be like Ellie, fit and strong as we age.
You can find out more about the Becoming Ellie community and this podcast at our website, becomingellie.com. Ellie is spelled E-L-L-I. Sign up for our newsletter while you're there.
Today, we're talking with Glenn Livingston about how to avoid overeating during the holidays and how to make a New Year's resolution that you can keep. Let's go to the podcast. About a year and a half ago, we had Dr. Glenn Livingston on the podcast. You might remember him from episode 155 or from his podcast and website, Defeat Your Cravings. We're so glad to have him back.
For those who aren't familiar, Glenn is a psychologist, researcher, and author who helps people overcome food cravings and binge eating. He used to be the CEO of a consulting firm for Fortune 500 food companies, but he shifted his focus to studying overeating through decades of clinical work and research with over 40,000 participants.
He shares his work through defeatyourcravings.com with online coaching and support groups, and his own journey from food addiction to a balanced, peaceful relationship with eating shapes his work and continues to inspire others.
Welcome to the podcast, Glenn. We're so happy to have you here to talk about all of this.
Oh, thank you. That was a really well-written and concise introduction. I really appreciate you guys putting the time into doing that. And I want you to follow me around and introduce me at parties now.
Okay.
Well, what should we talk about?
I thought that, we want to talk about the holidays. They're coming. But before we start that, maybe you could just give us a quick overview of how you managed to overcome your own eating problems, and maybe you can tell us what you've been doing since we talked to you in 2024.
Okay. Well, I am not just a doctor who works with overeaters. I'm a guy who used to be about 300 pounds myself. I say about because I stopped weighing myself when I got to 257 because I was kind of mad at myself and I didn't like the scale. Somewhere in that range. I'm 6'4", I'm modestly muscular, so it didn't show quite as much on me. I look like a mountain man, but it was very unhealthy. It was very, very unhealthy. My triglycerides were over 1,000, and the doctors were yelling at me that, I was going to die. I come from a family of clinical psychologists. There are literally 17 therapists in my extended family, and when I was 9 years old, I'd have my little friends come over and lie down on the couch and tell me about their mother. And if something breaks in the house, everybody asks it how it feels and nobody could fix it. So so that was my orientation to life. And I thought, therefore, that when I was struggling with food in my 20s and 30s, that I should be able to love myself then. And I went to the best psychologists and psychotherapists and went to psychiatrists and took medication, and I confessed my sins, and I cried and I screamed, and I looked at my past, I looked at my present, and it was a very soulful journey. I went to Overeaters Anonymous too. It was a very soulful journey. I learned a lot about myself. I learned to have compassion for myself, but I just kept on getting a little thinner and a lot fatter, and it was not working to help me with the overeating. Contiguous with all of this, I was doing consulting, and I had a clinical practice, not in food. I was working with couples and families. But I was consulting for industry, and I started to see, although it took a while to really, dawn on me that this is what was happening, I started to see that they were engineering these hyperpalatable concentrations of starch and sugar and fat and salt and excitotoxins. And it was all designed to hit the bliss point in the reptilian brain without giving us enough nutrition to feel satisfied. And the result of that was addiction. There were actually chemicals in some of the packaging that could interfere with your ability to know when you were full or when you were hungry. And so I started to think, well, that really doesn't have anything to do with, my personal psychology. Like, so what if I had these problems as a kid or my mama dropped me in my head? It doesn't really matter if they're targeting these lower brain functions that are responsible for survival, because all of this personal psychology mostly lives in your upper brain. Mostly that's where the memories and intuition and trauma responses and all the things that we work on as psychotherapists, that's where most of them live, your spirituality, your music. But the real problem in food addiction has to do with the reptilian brain. And these companies, they spend tens of millions of dollars to pay rocket scientists to short circuit that. So started to get an inkling that maybe I should step away from the love yourself thin approach and look more at a behavioral approach. I did a large study and it kind of led me nowhere. I had 40,000 people take a survey over 5 or 6 years, and there were some interesting newsworthy findings, like people that struggled with chocolate like me, they tended to be lonely, depressed, or brokenhearted. And I was in a not so great marriage, and I had some loneliness and depression from my upbringing. And, people who struggle with chips and crunchy, chewy things, they tended to be stressed at work. And people who struggle with starch, they tended to be stressed at home. But those insights didn't really help me. I remember talking to my mom about it, and we went over what happened to me in my infancy. And she was essentially very depressed because of some things happening with her dad and my dad. And she wasn't able to mother me the way that she wanted to. So she gave me chocolate. That's what it kind of came down to. And understanding that helped me love myself more, but it made my food problem worse because there was this crazy voice in my head that said, well, your mama didn't love you enough and she left a big chocolate-sized hole in your heart. So you're going to have to keep on filling it, until you can fix your marriage or stop being so lonely and depressed. That was a critical insight for me because I started saying, well, maybe I need to disempower that voice, and maybe I need to work more on building a fireplace around the emotions so these justifications can't get through. And then that led me to write the book When I Got Divorced about 10 years ago. And that book got super popular, and I wound up with a whole bunch of coaches working for me, and we would help people to fix their thinking and eliminate their excuses. And that worked really well for short periods of time, but I wasn't getting the long-term results that I really wanted to, because people would eventually say, screw it, I'm just going to do it. I don't care what my excuse is, I just really want to. So then I spent a couple of years looking into what's causing that. And that has to do with dysregulation, organismic distress, not getting enough sleep, not having good nutrition, not drinking enough water, not having enough social contact, making too many decisions over the course of the day, feeling overwhelmed. And when we put it all together, I started getting much better results. So that's a very short synopsis of what I learned with 2 million readers and 2,000 clients and 10 years of immersing myself with this. But that's my story. And that's why I do what I do today. Yeah.
Well, the holidays are coming and food sure can be tricky during them. What are the best strategies to avoid overeating during the season? Do you have any ideas for us?
Yeah. So I'm going to talk about practical plans, and I'm going to talk about managing the social implications of the holidays. Let's start with the practical plans first. Most people I work with who are trying to do well during the year, they want to have some type of a break over the holidays. So they say, well, I'm just going to eat whatever I want to over the holidays, and I'll resume on New Year's Day. That's a really bad idea. It's a very common idea, but it's a pretty bad idea, um, because it turns out that the solution to overeating has to do with moving your important food decisions from impulse and whim and emotion to your intellect. And like, I'm not going to tell you what to eat over the holidays. There's no reason you can't have anything you really want to for most people. But I will tell you that if you're trying to follow a set of rules and guidelines during most of the year, in order to keep your quote unquote food monster under control, keep it on a short leash, that to suddenly let it out for a month or so, or even just for a few days, you're atrophying the muscle, the mental muscle that teaches you to use your intellect to make decisions rather than your whims and emotions and impulses. That's the essence of overcoming overeating is not making decisions based on impulse and emotion and whim. And so what I tell people is, look, your food monster is going to give you a lot less trouble if you put it on a longer leash than if you let it off the leash. So what that looks like might be, on Thanksgiving, I want to have one serving of any main dish and dessert that I really want to have. Or if maybe I want to have one serving of any main dish and dessert, and I want one taste of everything else. But the point is that it's a very specific goal to shoot for, and it gives you a predefined start and stopping place. So when you're in the middle of this highly social situation with all the pressure to eat what everybody else is eating and all the temptation on the table, that you know when to stop. You know when to start, you know when to stop, and it's well defined beforehand. This plays into what happens when you go to make New Year's resolutions, because when New Year's rolls around, you've usually atrophied your muscles, your mental muscles so much that it's very, very hard. And then people choose this really difficult New Year's resolution. Okay, now I'm going to have, you know, about 12 calories a day until I lose all the weight that I need to.
I'm going to live on lettuce.
Yeah, I'm going to live on dirt and rocks and lettuce, and I'm going to be just the most awesome person ever. And that lasts about a day or two, and then that's gone. And so the combination of having atrophied your mental muscles over the holidays and then choosing much too high a bar to succeed at New Year's makes New Year's resolutions doomed for most people. But I don't want people to conclude that because most resolutions fail, that means the idea of making a resolution is a bad idea. What I prefer people do is ask themselves upfront, right now, before the holidays, ask yourself, what one simple rule might you like to follow on New Year's Day? What's one thing that you could and would do, which represents a pretty low bar? Like, are you going to put your fork down between bites, or maybe you're not going to go back for seconds, or maybe every night before you go to bed, you're just going to think through whether you have enough food and time to eat it for the next day. Just kind of give yourself a minute to scan it. Something that you could easily do. It's not too burdensome, but it would make a difference, and it would have you continue to exercise that mental muscle. And we find that when people start with a low bar, that they see themselves succeeding day in and day out, and then it triggers what we call the identity function. They say, "Oh, well, I seem to put my food down between bites. I must be someone who eats mindfully." Because I've seen myself do this week after week, as opposed to trying to eat 12 calories and dirt and rocks and lettuce, which you obviously can't do, and then feeling like a failure yet again. Um, so kind of the combination of making very specific boundaries for, Thanksgiving and Christmas or whatever you celebrate, and then starting with a very simple resolution, some very very easy to accomplish simple rule, and then you can add on to that plan once a week or once every 2 weeks when you see yourself succeeding with it. So that's my short advice for the holidays. The social part of the holidays is harder to manage. And I'll pause for a second in case you want to ask me a question about anything that I talked about, but remind me to come back to the social part, because there's a lot more I want to say about that.
Yeah, I want to come back to that too. But holiday time can be especially emotional for people, and often not necessarily positive. I mean, there's a lot of trauma or grief or whatever that happens around holidays. So are you saying you should, if you plan in advance, then you will come through all of the emotional stress without, I mean, how do you handle that?
Okay, we'll talk about emotional eating. Before I have this talk, I want you guys to know that I'm a very nice person. And if you need a hug, I'm going to give you a hug. Ask anybody that knows me. I'm one of the nicest people you know. I'm one of the most compassionate
Hey, I always say
therapists.
that. I'm the nicest person.
Okay, well, you can win. You can win. But
All right, that's very nice.
I say that because what my work focuses on after spending decades trying to love myself thin is very practical ways to sever the link between emotional overstimulation or discomfort and overeating. So I don't necessarily focus on healing the emotions in order to stop overeating. It's more like I'm building a fireplace around the emotions so that the ashes can't come out. And if they can't come out and get you overeating, there's something interesting that happens. Your brain is always trying to figure out what leads to the acquisition of calories because calories were scarce. Calories and nutrition were scarce 100,000 years ago. And so your brain is taking very careful notice of what conditions lead to the acquisition of calories. So if you, like on the Golden Girls, if you get depressed or you have a romantic upset and then you have a cheesecake, your brain's going to equate the idea of being upset or emotional with having cheesecake. And it's going to try to get you to be upset and emotional on a more regular basis so you can have cheesecake on a more regular basis. It sounds kind of funny, but it's based on operant conditioning. And so as much as people say that the cheesecake numbs them out or it makes it easier to deal with the emotions, that's only in the short term because when you overload the digestive system, the nervous system has more difficulty conducting the emotions. But what also happens when you have that cheesecake is via operant conditioning, you've reinforced the emotions. So you're training your system to have more of those. So first and foremost, we want to build that. We want to build that fireplace so that you can feel whatever you need to feel because you will feel things on the holidays. Dad's going to say something crazy, or Uncle Art's going to bring his 20-year-old girlfriend, and everybody's going to be upset. Something's going to happen. Okay. So that's the first thing I will say is just recognize that it's a two-way relationship and stop telling yourself that you're numbing out or comforting yourself with overeating because what you're really doing is getting high with food and you're creating more of a problem and it's a snowball that cycles downhill. And remember, you can have a hug if you need a hug from Dr. Glenn. Now, the second thing has to do with understanding where emotional pressure to overeat comes from. Like why does it feel so compelling when mom comes running up to you and says, darling, I made you the chocolate pie that you love. I use your favorite kind of chips. I made it just for you. Here, have a piece now. Wouldn't you love some? Why does that feel so compelling? Why is it so difficult to say no, thank you, or maybe for later, or could you wrap it up? I'll take. Why is that so difficult? And to really help you understand why that is so difficult, I would like to teach you a little bit about group psychology. Let's say that I walk into an elevator and there are 12 people there. Those 12 people are going to get as far apart from each other as they possibly can. They're not going to look at each other. They're not going to touch arms. They're going to be staring at the screen above to find out what floor they're on. At the very most, they're going to say, "What floor would you like me to push for you?" But there's not any cohesive interaction that goes on in that group of people. That's what we call an aggregate. And that's really that's the case because if when I got to the 12th floor and I got out, if I stopped to say, hey, you know what, guys, this was great. Let's get together again right here next year. They're going to look at me like I'm crazy, right?
Right.
Because there was no real shared experience. We didn't form a shared code of behavior. We have no morals or values that define the group. We We don't really know how we're supposed to interact together to maintain a cohesive bond. So it's silly to think about getting together again. But if that elevator were to get stuck and 3 hours later the repairman come in, you would see that maybe we developed a song to sing to people who really have to go to the bathroom and we don't want them to go in the elevator. Maybe we developed a rule for how often we can touch the panic button. Maybe we developed a way of talking to someone who gets really scared and is having a panic attack and can't breathe. So we had to solve problems as a group. Therefore, we had to develop a coding behavior. Therefore, we engaged in social bonding. We've turned from an aggregate into a group. Okay. So at that point, if I say, hey, would you guys like to get together next year and just kind of, relive what we went through? This was a really nice adventure. We could call ourselves the LVs or whatever we're going to call ourselves. Let's go get dinner and talk about it. They might say yes, or at the very least, they wouldn't laugh me out of the conversation because it's become a group. Well, that quality of groupness, of a shared code of behavior, of a kind of intimate communication in a way that we interact with each other, that's what a family really is. And a family is probably the ultimate group. It turns out that the quality of groupness is a little bit ephemeral. It doesn't last forever. It has to be restored and rejuvenated. And so if you haven't seen your family for a little while and you walk back to Thanksgiving, there are things that they want to do because 100,000 years ago, tribes were essential. Like you could die if you were isolated from the tribe alone. Um, and so on a very primitive level, they want to restore the sense of groupness and cohesion in the family. And one of the ways that they do that is with food. So when mom says, I made chocolate pie again, this is Thanksgiving pie, this is your favorite pie, here, come in and have some. Unconsciously, she's trying to restore the cohesiveness of the family. So when you say, oh, chocolate's not good for me, and my doctor doesn't want me to have that, and you probably shouldn't be having it either, she feels guilty. But more importantly, she feels like the fabric of the tribe is at stake, like the family won't cohere. It sounds a little crazy, but when you kind of analyze it, that's what's happening. And so what you want to do is not engage in an argument with her, but go prepared to give her an alternative way to love you back into the tribe. What that looks like might be, Mom, you know what? I've been really cold all day. I don't know what's wrong with me. Do you have a sweater? Could I borrow one of Michael's sweaters? Oh, sure, honey. I'll go get that for you. Let me love you back into the tribe. Here is warmth for you. That's what we do in this family. We love each other back into the tribe. Oh, Mom, my stomach is a tiny bit upset. I had too much at lunch. Do you have any peppermint tea? Of course, honey. Let me go get you some peppermint tea that you like. Mom, I don't know what the score of the game is. I couldn't get a good connection in the car, and I'm dying to figure out what the score of the football game is. Could I go to the TV and take a look? Of course, honey. Let me take you right now. That's what we do. We take care of each other's needs in this family. Give her some way to love you back in the tribe so you can just sidestep that whole conversation. That's the best technique I ever found for managing social discomfort and overeating in a family environment. The other thing you have to remember is that 100,000 years ago, when we were evolving these instincts, that we didn't have all this variety of food. There would be a harvest or a hunt, and there would be buffalo available, or there would be blueberries available. Everybody's labor was probably required to keep the tribe going. It was dangerous if people refused to eat, because then they could get sick or die or worse. And every member was needed for the tribe. And so it wasn't like, yeah, eat whatever you want. It was like, no, you're going to eat what we have or we're going to kill you. Right. It was very, very, so I was brought up in a Jewish family where there's a lot of guilt about not eating. And now I understand where some of that all comes from. And warring tribes, when they made peace, would break bread together to establish those norms. So there's a lot going on. It's not just, well, mom wants me to be fat. That's pretty rare. It's more about the social cohesion and how do we maintain that. And if you attend to that, you'll find that a lot of the social pressure goes away. So
we got to figure out ways to reconnect, but not necessarily with a lot of calories around it.
yes,
That's very helpful. That's very helpful.
I like to be helpful.
Well, it makes sense. I mean, the whole making certain dishes is really a way that people show love, but there are
Right?
certainly other ways to show love, so you sort of have to get them there.
Yeah. Well, when you think about the holiday meals or getting together with the holidays, particularly the meals, there's certain things that you remember one person would make and they're not with us anymore. And so we're going to have that. And then just keep adding things to the list to trying to make it more and more special, you know.
Well, and that's why it can be helpful if you're not genuinely addicted and you can have a taste of this or a taste of that, to adjust your rules so that maybe I don't eat bread during the year, but on Thanksgiving I can have, a taste of every flour dish that's there if I want to. But just a very specific thing so you don't seem as awkward or like you're rejecting people and you don't have to rely on these techniques too much.
Yeah, there is that whole, "I don't eat this." That you don't wanna be that person sitting at the holiday dinner table.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
don't want to have to ask the ingredient of every food you're about to put in your mouth.
Now, on the other hand, I have to tell you that I've got all kinds of health conditions. And I came to the conclusion that, you know what? I am done harming myself with food so that other people can be comfortable. I I'll eat what I can, but, I'm not going to have, for me, I'm not going to have meat or cholesterol. I had a heart attack. I'm just not going to do it. I'm not going to harm myself with food so that,
Right, right,
yeah,
right.
But that's okay. I mean, that's a very specific. That's like someone who has, I don't know, Crohn's disease is not going to say, "Well, I'll be polite and eat the stuffing."
yeah. Even before I had had the cardiovascular event, which was totally genetic, by the way, and I have no damage, thank goodness.
That's great.
But even before that, I felt like I was not going to harm myself out of guilt. I would figure out what I can do, what I can eat. I would write it all out beforehand. I'd decide what the boundaries were. But beyond that, I wasn't going to go. So I'll tell you a story. Um, I had this date on Christmas Eve, and I probably should not have had a date on Christmas Eve because it was a first date and it was just too much. And we were going to meet my dad and his wife for a Christmas Eve dinner. And we come to dessert, and this very sweet woman, she puts her hands on my arm and she whispers in my ear very seductively, "You should have something really indulgent so that people don't feel bad. It's Christmas Eve." And at that point, I thought to myself, well, why can't we all just eat what we want? Like, what I really want is blueberries. What you really want is tiramisu. Why can't we all just eat what we want and be happy? I want you to have what you want. I want to have what I want. And that line worked out really well. Nobody felt guilty about what they were doing. Everybody was, happy. I love blueberries. I'm a blueberry guy. Um, so why can't we all just eat what we want also? See, there are a lot of options. You have a lot of options. And I think that once you understand some of these techniques, you can craft them together like notes on the piano to play the music that you want to play through the holidays.
And it sounds like planning is key.
Oh yeah. You don't want to just go buzz into it's kind of like a scuba diver going out without oxygen. You don't want to just go
Yeah, I'll
buzz
hold my
into one of
breath.
these social
Yeah.
events. Yeah.
Jump
Yeah.
in both feet. Hope they have some blueberries nearby.
Uh, yeah. Okay. So most of the pressure to overeat socially can be solved with the alternative love gift approach. But sometimes there are people who are more pernicious and looking to put you down or, feel superior or, they really need you to overeat so that they feel better about themselves. Sometimes there are people like that. And I find that there are a couple of ways to deal with that. For example, my dad was not always the nicest person. And one time I walked in to a social gathering with family and friends that were very important to me. And in front of everybody, he looked at me, he says, "Getting fat," to say that. And, and I didn't handle it so well at the time. I was only about 32, 33 years old. And I basically wanted to go into the closet and cry all night. Um, at the time. When I've been in similar situations like that, at this point, I would say, Dad, I see you've been practicing your social skills. Good for you. You're doing great. I would kind of give them a little zinger back, let it roll off me. And then I would deflect the conversation to something else. I also, if I know there's going to be someone like that there, I would prepare. And I'd ask myself, what's the worst thing this person could say? And then I'd ask myself, would I ever say that about someone in my position? Like if I have a friend who, was about my weight or had a similar problem, would I ever say something nasty like that to them? And the answer is inevitably no when I ask people that. So, well, what would you say to them? A lot of times they say they would just go and give the person a hug, or, maybe they would go get a salad for themselves so that that person didn't have to feel alone and eating something healthy. And having compassion for that wounded child beforehand and figuring out how you would take care of her, it inoculates you against the actual blow when it happens. And you find that you can, I won't say it's going to bounce off you because it's still kind of painful, but it goes through you a lot quicker. So, ask yourself, what would you say to someone you love who was being told those kind of things? And would you ever say something like that? And then it just, it's put you in a position where you have the perspective to say, oh, this is this person's problem. They're making themselves look bad. It doesn't really have much to do with me. And, you know, I know what I weigh. I know what my problem is. I know what I'm doing to fix it. It just, kind of forge through like that and say what doesn't kill me makes me stronger. And just kind of walk step by step through a situation like that. So that's what I
Okay.
help people do in those type of social situations.
And is there anything more about New Year's resolutions? So basically, let me see if I can start sort of like the baby step kind of thing. Just pick something that's pretty easy to do and focus on that. And then eventually that leads to improving other behaviors.
Very well defined. I use the words never and always in my rule definitions, and people are very frightened of that because they think that that means they can't change the rule later on if they really want to. But I use them in a very special way. I think of it as how we present the rule to our food monster, because our food monster is like a 2-year-old when it comes to food. And you have to tell 2-year-olds things that you wouldn't really talk to other people. You wouldn't talk to grown-ups in that way. Like, look, you can't ever, ever, ever just run out into the street by yourself. You always have to hold my hand. Never, ever, ever. Not when you're a big girl, not next year. You can't ever, ever, ever go in the street without holding my hand. It's just too dangerous. And that's the sense that I use the word never when I'm creating a rule. Like maybe next year I will never have bread again. But I know that with experience and knowledge that I'm probably going to change the rules later on, just like I did with my 2-year-old niece. And I told her there came a time when she could walk into the street without holding my hand. But I wasn't going to tell her that when she was 2. So people get frightened of the very specific definitions of the rules, but like I will never have chocolate during the week again is a lot more powerful than I'm going to just try to avoid chocolate 90% of the time. Because when you say I'll try to avoid chocolate 90% of the time, you're not making any chocolate decisions up front. And decisions wear down your willpower. So every time you're in front of a chocolate bar, you're going to have to say, is this part of the 90% or part of the 10%? It's better to say, I only have chocolate on Saturdays and only 2 ounces. So be very, very specific so that your food decisions have been made for you and you're not going to have to think too much on a day-to-day basis. Those are the big ones.
So people will have said, the 80-20, eat healthy 80% of the time, and then 20% of the time you can eat whatever you want. And so I thought, oh, that's great advice. And then I realized that 20% really is not all the time. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
It always feels like it's the 20% time.
Right. It was like that just to me turned out to be license to ignore the rules I was setting for myself.
Yes. Yes. That's what most people say. Yeah.
Yeah.
So do you
But
like to pick specific foods that you won't eat? Is that helpful? Like you said, chocolate.
for some people,
Okay.
for some people, I wound up never having chocolate again. I started by saying I'll never have it during the week, only on the weekends. But ultimately, for me, never was easier than sometimes, like a lot easier than sometimes. Um, it kind of depends how deep a neurological groove you built with that habit. And I find statistically 2 out of 3 people don't have to say never. They can create a very specific condition under which they can have it, and it works just fine. Um, and the reason that's the case is that the brain is capable of conditional extinction. Think about a slot machine. If you go to Las Vegas, you're going to see, usually a lot of little old ladies on the slot machines all day long, and they don't want to leave their slot machines. The reason is that they don't know when it's going to pay off, so you got to be there, pull the arm, pull the arm, pull the arm. Well, if I were to set that machine so that it only paid off on Saturday mornings, within a couple of weeks, the casinos would be empty, at least in the slot machine area, all week long. They would all just get crowded on Saturday mornings because the brain starts to understand, oh, the reward is only available on Saturday mornings. And so the brain's capacity to look for, it's called the sign stimulus, conditional, signs that the reward is available, is very strong. So it's entirely possible for most people, 2 out of 3 people with most substances, to create conditional rules. And I find it varies from substance to substance. Someone who can't regulate sugar might be perfectly capable of regulating flour. And it's just up to you if you want to take the risk and give it a shot. So mostly people can do it. But I'll tell you one more thing about it. Sometimes the rewards of having none are much stronger.
How do you mean?
Well, when I would have a little chocolate, I feel kind of edgy, like it affects me very strongly. So my heart would race a little bit. I feel kind of edgy and anxious. It would be, I could think a little more creatively, but I couldn't be as calm of a therapist. I couldn't be as calm of a person with my girlfriend. And so life was different having none than it would be having some. And those rewards outstrip the ability to have it sometimes. Same thing with flour. It's just like very heavy in my gut. So I don't eat flour. Every now and then I have a little bit of a craving, and so I'll plan it out and, you know, a couple of months in advance or something. I'll think, oh, I'm going to have a plate of pasta on such and such a day. And then I wish that I didn't do it. And I get a little bit of a craving the next day and then it's gone. Yeah, sometimes the rewards of none are better than the rewards of some.
This has nothing to do with overeating, I suppose. But you said earlier you don't eat meat, you don't eat chocolate, you don't eat flour based. So, are you are vegetarian?
Yeah, so let me just say that my program is diet agnostic. You can make this work on any reasonable diet. You can't make it work if you just want to have donuts or you only want to have 200 calories a day. It won't.
Okay.
You have to nutrify your body. But
I just was interested in that. But yeah, I get it.
me personally, I'm a whole foods plant-based person.
Okay.
Yeah, I live on beans and fruits and vegetables and
Okay.
greens and a couple of nuts and seeds, and I'm happy like that. Yeah, but that's just me personally. That's not how
Right.
my
I understand.
clientele.
You're not
Yeah.
saying everyone should be eating that way. I get that. I just was curious.
Well, wanted to talk a little bit about some new things that have happened. I say recently, I'm thinking recently, but that's the GLP-1 medications. And I'm wondering if you could talk about that. First of all, what are they and how are they used? But then if you can talk about how they may fit into the work that you do.
Yeah, they are very powerful medications. They result in about 15% of body fat loss, on average, from what I've seen, depending upon the medication and the person. But it's, as compared to only 2 or 3% for diet and lifestyle changes that are, you know, kind of longer term weight loss. So they're very powerful medications. They do have a bunch of side effects. I'm not a medical doctor. I'm a PhD psychologist, just for a disclaimer. And GLP-1s are the weight loss injections that everybody's talking about. I think of them in much the same way that I thought about psychiatric medications for depression and anxiety in my clinical practice. I had a very large clinical practice in my 30s, and some people, although I was originally against medication, I thought that you were hiding from your feelings if you did that. I noticed there were some people whose feelings were so intense that they couldn't really use therapy because they just couldn't talk about it. And if we, or they couldn't function, they couldn't get out of bed. And if we got them some medication for a while, they did a lot better. They can make more use of therapy. And the combination was really powerful. I I think about, and a lot of people would get off the medication eventually. Some people would stay on it almost indefinitely because it really was a chemical imbalance in their case. Um, and I think of the GLP-1s the same way. I think it's a little dangerous to think of them as the only solution because, first of all, they often stop being as effective and they require you to make changes in diet and lifestyle anyway a year or so down the road. Secondly, you might have bad side effects that makes it impossible to keep taking them. And thirdly, we don't really know what the very long-term impact of it is. And wouldn't it be better if you, talk it over with your doctor? Some doctors will want you on it indefinitely, particularly if you have cardiovascular issues, because there's some cardioprotective elements of these medications. So your doctor might want you on it indefinitely, but I always feel like it's just like it was helpful for people to take antidepressants or anxiolytics when they came into therapy, and then they could make a lot better use out of therapy. Sometimes the cravings are too intense. Sometimes the cravings are just too intense to use these cognitive behavioral thinking tools that I teach. And it just seems to break through no matter what you do. And if that's the case, and you can damp down the cravings, and then you can learn these cognitive behavioral tools. So maybe you're going to get stronger and be able to do it without the medication, or maybe you can lower the dose of the medication. And I don't think there's any shame in that game. I think that, people can say, well, but there are these risky side effects, but there are also risks of remaining obese. There are all risks of getting worse because overeating tends to get worse with time. And so I'm actually really happy that the medications are available. I think that you have to make individual decisions with your doctor about your health and, you know, which ones you're going to take at what dosage for how long. But I've seen a lot of good results with them, and I'm not against it at all. In terms of how they work, they slow your stomach's emptying capacity. There are a couple of other mechanisms, but basically they slow your stomach's emptying capacity, the emptying speed. And so you tend to feel full for longer, and as a consequence, you want less food. It is still possible to binge eat while you're taking them. I particularly find that high levels of stress can break through the protection that the GLP-1s offer. And so it's yet another reason to work on all these diet and lifestyle and thinking tools. But I'm happy they're available, despite the risks. Evaluate it with your doctors, see what you think. And I'm very happy to work with people that are on the medication if they want me to.
I've talked with a number of people who focus really on the side effects and why it's a dangerous thing to do. But one day I was at my doctor's office and a nurse or aide or something, whatever she was taking my blood pressure, and she made the comment that she had lost weight. And she said it in a way that because I normally wouldn't ask about weight, but she said it in a way that I said, so I asked her about it, and she said she had lost 190 pounds, and she was taking one of the medications, and she said, "People say that I took the easy way out," she said, "but it was not easy." She said, "I still had to change the way I eat, and I exercise every day," she said, "but it has basically saved my life."
Yeah, it saves a lot of people's lives. Yeah.
That was like a really I don't just in my going about life, I don't hear many of those sort of compelling stories. You hear more about people griping about, well, you're going to lose your muscle and you're going to do this and you're going to do that. But you're right. Being obese is not good for your health either.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the shame is really not helpful. If if you'd been hit by a car and you couldn't walk, you wouldn't be embarrassed about using a wheelchair. You go to physical therapy, you do everything you could to get out of the wheelchair. Some people might need to keep using it. Some people might need to keep using crutches. Other people could get cured by the physical therapy. It's very individual, and I think you need to have the treatment that matches the problem. And no shame in getting treatment. I think it's very damaging for people to be told that you're taking the easy way out, and I think it's.
People could be doing both. They could certainly be using the medication and be working with some of the behavioral things that you teach.
I mean, I have dozens of people doing that. So, yeah.
It sounds like you really do have to use both. It's not just, you can't just use.
And your doctor will tell you that too. Your doctor is going to say, "Well, here's the injection. Now just forget about it and take your shot every week." The doctors will tell you that also.
Yeah, well, it is sort of like antidepressants or whatever, because doctors will prescribe those without necessarily saying you should go talk to somebody.
No, I find that doctors tell people you need to work on your diet and lifestyle.
Yeah, that makes sense.
They
Okay.
caution them against thinking of it as a magic shot.
Okay.
Now, the problem is it's becoming more and more available with very little consultation. And people can get it online and from other countries. And there are some scary things going on, but I'm very much in favor of people talking to a traditional doctor and, figuring out how to do it with that guidance and advice.
Right. I have been inundated with ads for ordering medications online so you don't have to go see your doctor.
Yeah, it's scary.
Why don't you remind us of your website and your book and where people can find you?
Okay. Well, it's all in the same place. The book is free on the Kindle, Nook, and PDF. If you go to defeatyourcravings.com and click the big blue button, you also get a bunch of other cool stuff like got a whole set of MP3s and case study demonstrations so you can see how this works in practice. That's also free when you click the big blue button at defeatyourcravings.com. And we've got some food plan starter templates that are also free. We have templates for every possible dietary philosophy. So whether you're ketogenic or whole foods plant-based or, point counting, calorie counting, whatever it is that you're doing, we've got some sample plans you might want to consider. Defeatyourcravings.com, click the big blue button.
Yeah, that's wonderful. We'll make sure that there's a link on the show notes so that it's available.
Okay. Thank you. Well, it's delightful to talk to you.
It was wonderful talking with
having
you.
me on again.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
thanks. I should make getting through the holidays or enjoying the holiday. I shouldn't say getting through them. Enjoying the holidays a little more easy.
I really hope so.
Yeah, we really appreciate your thoughts. Thank you.
Bye, guys. Happy holidays.
Happy holidays to you.
Bye-bye.
Bye. It was good to have Glenn back on the podcast. He really helps with the idea that we can control what we eat.
Yeah. Well, I really like the fact that he used to work for a company that worked with the food companies. So he understands this whole craving, like where that all starts in so many ways. It's in the reptilian brain. And when you start thinking about that, it's really hard to have control over it unless you recognize why that craving's so strong as you're driving past Dairy Queen or whatever it is, I am glad that he reminded us about that.
He kept saying you can't love yourself to
Leash the monster, the food monster.
Yeah, that's good. And the whole idea of planning. We
Yeah.
talk a lot about planning, like about planning your meals for the week or whatever, but actually having a plan for going into the holidays is, I think it's a good one.
Yeah. Well, the idea of just, let loose for the next 6 weeks or whatever it is, into the new year, it's just too wild and too hard to get it back under control. But I liked what he said about if you just figure, I'm going to try the things that I really love to eat, and then I'll have one bite of the things that I just want to test for somebody else if they're really, pushing the food on me or whatever.
But also that you don't have to eat just to please someone. I mean,
Right.
so like if you don't eat certain foods, you don't have to feel compelled to do so, to try
Yeah.
it.
Well, his example of like when you walk in the door and they're trying to push the food on, then you say something like, "Oh, I could borrow a sweater," or "I could I have some peppermint tea? Just remembered how much you," I don't know, like you kind of deflect it. You have a plan. That's an interesting thought because I haven't really thought about it so much. I mean, maybe chewing slower, putting the fork down, those kind of things. Trying to make it about the people there instead of the food.
Right. Right. Well, I know at our family Thanksgivings over the past few years, we've had, because of marriages and
Mhm.
whatever, we have different traditions being brought to the table. So we end up with a lot of extra food because everyone wants, like, this is what we always had.
And he's right, your willpower, when you have too many decisions, after a while, you're just like, "Oh, forget it, I'm just gonna eat."
Right.
Especially when there's all those tempting things just laying all over the place and you don't have a plan.
Right. It's the planning that really becomes key, I think. And same thing. So the New Year's resolution, I like the idea of, well, one, don't make a huge resolution. Make it one small thing that you can actually commit to doing.
A low bar,
Yeah.
right?
All
I
right.
love that.
Well,
But then you see yourself as a success and you can raise the bar a little bit
right.
rather than trying to jump in, 150% on the first day, just like everyone goes to the gym the first 2 weeks of January and
I
they're
know.
back to
I have
nothing.
been a steady gym goer for many years now, and there's always that period at the beginning of the new year where the lockers are full and the machines are all
Uh-huh.
busy, and then those of us who are there, like in October, will say to each other, "They'll be gone soon."
Yeah, well, I tend to fluctuate going to the gym. When the weather is really nice, I find I don't really want to go into the gym and work out. I want to do
Well,
stuff
certainly I
outside. So,
fluctuate on it, but I
yeah.
mean, I have been a fairly
Yeah.
I'm not there every minute, but I just
You're a
mean
regular.
I'm
Yep.
not there for
You're a
2 weeks at the
regular.
beginning of January, and then I disappear
Right.
again.
Yep. Yep. Well, I like the idea of the low bar so that, it's not too much. And also, I wanted to mention how great it was that he's willing to share his book for free, the Kindle or PDF, and, MP3s of, audio files you can download with case studies and stuff, that food templates. I mean, he just has so much free stuff on his website that is helpful. I just think that's great.
Right, that is wonderful, and his website is defeatyourcravings.com?
.com. Yep, that's it. Defeatyourcravings.com. Said something, just click the blue button. Well, we'll have the link here on the show notes. So,
Okay, well, I enjoyed talking with him. I'm really grateful to him for sharing his info with us.
well, I have a feeling too, if there's someone that really, one of our listeners that really is struggling to get their cravings under control, I think he's the one that could really help you. 'Cause
Yeah, I
he
agree.
understands how it all works. That's for sure.
Well, if you're listening, let Chris and me know what you think about enjoying the holidays without overeating. What works for you?
Or let us know your ideas about the New Year's resolutions. You can leave a message at becomingellie.com. And you can also find us as Becoming Ellie on Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, YouTube, and LinkedIn.
If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to the podcast and share it with a friend. Maybe write a review or leave a rating.
And if you like this podcast, you'll probably enjoy this one too. Women in the Middle is a podcast for midlife women who are ready to hear some good news about being over 50.
Susie Rosenstein shares the
Why did you laugh?
Why did I laugh? Just because the good news about being over 50 just struck me as funny.
Yep.
Susie Rosenstein shares the good, bad, ugly, and sometimes downright hysterical about growing older, making the changes you want to make so you don't have regrets in your second chapter. Visit susierosenstein.com to listen.
It was great talking with you today, Jill. I'm looking forward to our next episode of the Fit Strong Women Over 50 podcast.
I am too. See you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.